You might look like a man, but inside, you're still a boy. And if you don't face that truth, it will quietly destroy everything you build. Let's not sugarcoat it. Maybe you've aged. Maybe you've collected titles and responsibilities. But if you still let your emotions drive every reaction, if you explode when things don't go your way, if your decisions are just dressed up impulses, then you haven't grown. You've simply gotten older. And this isn't just about maturity. It's a warning. Because that child inside of you, the one you keep feeding with comfort, excuses, and denial, he's not harmless. He's dangerous. He is the silent architect of your failures. The invisible weight dragging every goal down with him. Machiavelli saw this clearly, and he despised it. To him, power was not about feelings. It was cold, surgical, brutally rational. In his world, there was no place for outbursts, no tolerance for suppressed tantrums. He who governs with emotion is destined to be governed by it. Here comes the first stab. Many of the people you admire today, those you think are leaders, are nothing more than oversized boys wearing suits and wielding authority with the emotional control of children. And the scary part, you might be one of them. Ever wondered why your life feels like a loop? Why your relationships keep collapsing? Why you sabotage yourself just when things start to work? I'll tell you, because you're addicted to instant gratification. You want what you want now. You don't know how to wait. You crumble when the world asks you for patience. And the worst part? You've romanticized it. You call it being real, being honest, following your heart. But let's be honest, it's not authenticity. It's immaturity, emotional infantilism, wearing the mask of modern self-expression. Machiavelli didn't write to flatter you. He wrote to warn you, to remind you this world is a battlefield, and emotions poorly managed are broken weapons. A prince who can't control his inner world isn't a ruler. He's a victim wearing a crown. Give him a title. Wrap him in designer suits. Call him CEO, president, founder. But if he's still ruled by impulse, he'll fall, not maybe, inevitably. Because here's what children don't know, and strategists never forget. Patience is deadlier than rage. And if you don't learn that, you're just fodder in someone else's game. Listen carefully. Immaturity is not a phase. It's not something that vanishes with age. It's a disease that grows with every reckless move you make. And at first, it feels good. You shout, you react, you explode. It feels like power, but it's not. It's a lie. A rush of false dominance that only leads to failure. Because the man-child doesn't think ahead. He doesn't plan. He doesn't measure risk. He just acts like an animal backed into a corner. And in the world of politics, business, relationships, that's a recipe for ruin. The world doesn't reward impulsive men. It uses them. You want to know why manipulators always win? Because they study people like you. They know exactly which buttons to press, exactly which words to say, exactly which silence will break you. And before you even speak, you're already ensnared. Machiavelli spoke of two forces, the cunning of the fox and the strength of the lion. Two animals, two strategies. But do you know what doesn't exist in his model? That model Machiavelli spoke of, the cunning fox and the powerful lion, had no room for children because a child doesn't strategize. A child reacts. A child wants to win now without thinking about what it might cost later. And that's exactly why the child loses. The kind of leader Machiavelli respected wasn't the loudest voice in the room, not the one always talking, not the one always keeping it real. It was the one who knew when to stay quiet, when to wait, when to look vulnerable, just long enough to strike with precision when the moment is right. And none of it, is possible if you're emotionally immature. But now comes the real blow. In this broken society, we don't just tolerate emotional children, we celebrate them. We give them microphones. We flood them with followers. We call them brave for saying whatever comes to their mind, no matter how reckless, how arrogant, how out of control. We applaud what we should be correcting. Impulsiveness becomes authenticity. Meltdowns become passion. Tantrums become truth. And all the while, we're feeding a culture of dysfunction. Do you see the game? We've become addicted to watching grown-up children run the world. We cheer for their chaos. We mimic their behavior. We defend their collapse. And then, when everything inevitably burns, we act surprised. Now look inward. How many times have you made a decision you knew was wrong just because you couldn't resist? How many people have you hurt? Not because you meant to, but because you had to speak your mind in that moment. That's not power. That's not honesty. That's weakness. And you know it, but the truth cuts deep, so you hide behind words like real, raw, genuine. Machiavelli wasn't heartless. He was clear. He didn't romanticize emotion. He understood its danger. Life doesn't reward the sincere. It rewards the strategic. And being strategic doesn't mean you're fake. It means you choose your battles. You speak with intent. You stay silent with purpose. You know when to play the long game. Can you do that? Or are you still hoping that the world will one day reward you just for being yourself? Here's the truth no one wants to hear. The world owes you nothing. Not love, not understanding, not 1 second chance. What isn't earned with discipline will be lost to emotional chaos. Emotional maturity is not a bonus. It's not a luxury. It's a weapon. It's survival. It's the only thing that keeps you grounded when your world collapses. It's the difference between exploding and observing, between screaming and waiting, between reacting and calculating. That's power, and it's already in you, but only if you're willing to let that impulsive child die. Leadership doesn't begin with charisma. It starts with self-control. With that quiet voice in your head that says, wait, the one you ignore every time you react instead of reflect. But Machiavelli would tell you, that voice is your salvation. It's your only shot at greatness, because history isn't written by those who erupt. It's written by those who master the pause, who know when to retreat, when to yield, when to disappear, and when to return like a storm. So ask yourself, right now, who's making your decisions? The grounded adult or the wounded child? Because if it's the child, it doesn't matter what success you build, it will collapse. Not because the world is cruel, but because you never learned to rule yourself. That anger you're feeling right now, it's not directed at me. It's at you, because you recognize this truth, and that truth unsettles you, but it can also free you, because when you stop acting like a child, everything changes. Your relationships shift, your environment evolves, your power becomes real. This world is harsh on the immature, not out of cruelty, but out of urgency. It simply doesn't have time for those who refuse to grow. It uses them, and when it's done, it discards them. So you choose. Will you be part of that easily manipulated crowd, or will you finally take the reins? Maturity is a weapon. Wield it, because here comes the final truth you've been avoiding. If you don't grow, you will be crushed. If you don't learn to control yourself, someone else will do it for you. And then you won't be a man. You'll be a boy, locked in a prison you built yourself, with bars made of excuses, emotions you refuse to manage, and chances you let slip away. Machiavelli isn't judging you. He's preparing you. He's showing you the battlefield, but only if you're ready to look, only if you're ready to lead. Have the courage to stand in front of the mirror, really look, and recognize the truth. The child inside you is still calling the shots, and it's time to end it. Not with hate, but with discipline, with strategy, with vision, because only when that child steps aside can the real you rise. Only then will you begin to govern yourself, and eventually govern the world. Now let's cross a line most people fear to touch. Let's talk about emotional immaturity's secret twin, the craving for validation. Because if there's one thing that defines the man-child beyond his impulsive nature, it's this constant gnawing hunger to be seen, to be praised, to be applauded. And no, I'm not talking about the healthy human desire for connection. I'm talking about dependency. That bottomless pit of need that measures self-worth by attention. Sound familiar? Of course it does. You've felt it. You've chased it. You've needed it. The problem isn't that you want recognition. The problem is you don't know who you are without it. And that's dangerous, because the moment your identity relies on approval, you're no longer free. Anyone who can withhold applause can control you. You don't need shackles on your wrists. Just a few likes. Just a crowd clapping. And suddenly, you're tamed. That's not power. That's servitude. You've been living like this for years. And the worst part? You still think you're in control, but you're not. The man-child confuses visibility with value. He believes that being noticed equals being important. He floods the world with what he's doing, thinking, feeling, as if silence would erase him, as if being unseen meant he would cease to exist. And when that craving for recognition gets paired with power, disaster, because every decision becomes performance, every action is a scene, every word is staged. Power stops being a tool and becomes a drug. And here's where Machiavelli returns. He never denied the importance of appearance. He knew that in politics and power, what seems to be can matter more than what is. But he never said to become enslaved to the image. The true strategist manipulates his image like a weapon, but never confuses the weapon with the warrior. The man-child, he becomes the mask. He forgets there's a person behind the performance. He confuses acting the part with being the part, until one day the weight of the role crushes him. And you, how many times have you done the same? How many times have you said what was expected just to be accepted? How many times have you betrayed your own beliefs just to avoid rejection? That's not maturity. That's not survival. That's emotional dependence. That's infantilism. It's not about having emotions. It's about being ruled by them. It's about letting the fear of disapproval override your judgment. And now comes the darkest twist. The man-child doesn't just ruin himself. He brings everyone around him down too. His insecurity spreads. His instability creates chaos. And those who follow him, they pay the price. But for you, it's not too late. Not yet. But that window won't stay open forever. You have to decide. Now, because the cost of continuing to act like a child is your freedom and your legacy. If you've made it this far, something inside you has already shifted. Maybe you can't explain it yet, but you feel it. That restlessness, that discomfort, that sharp edge of realization that something's wrong with how you've been living. That's not just a passing thought. That's awakening, not the magical kind, not the overnight transformation people romanticize. This is the real thing. It's slow, it's painful, it's uncomfortable, it's invisible, but it's real. And if you keep going, if you can keep digging past the excuses, you may finally become the person you've been pretending to be. So let's say it, plain and raw. Maturing is not glorious. It doesn't feel heroic. There are no cheers, no medals. It's silent. It's lonely. And most of the time, no one will even notice. But when it happens, everything changes. You stop pointing fingers. You stop chasing attention. You stop performing. And for the first time, you start acting with purpose. And that's when everything changes. When you stop performing for approval and start acting to transform. It's at that very point that the child inside you begins to die, and something new, more complete, takes its place. A human being capable of building, of leading, of enduring, without collapsing under the weight of his own emotions. But don't get it twisted. Maturity doesn't mean suppressing your feelings or becoming a machine. It means learning to keep emotions in their proper place, listening to them, understanding them, but never letting them drive the car. You feel, yes, but you don't hand over the wheel. And when you reach that level of control, that rare balance, people around you sense it without you saying a word. You don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to prove your value. Your very presence carries the weight of someone who's already conquered the war within. Now here comes something deeper, something harder to swallow. Adulthood. Real adulthood doesn't arrive with age. It arrives the moment you accept that no one's coming to save you, that it's just you. Facing your impulses, your fears, your most convenient lies. And if you win that battle, then everything else, the influence, the success, the recognition, becomes a byproduct, not a purpose. Pause for a second and ask yourself, who's been running your life until now? The man or the child inside the man? If the answer unsettles you, good. Discomfort is the beginning of transformation. You don't need to post about it. You don't need to announce it. Just write it deep inside. Today begins my true adulthood, not for anyone else, not to impress, but because you're done pretending the mask still fits. Let the old you quietly fade. Let the silence grow louder than the noise you used to crave. Let people wonder what changed in you, because by the time they figure it out, it'll be too late to stop what you've become. And remember this, those who refuse to evolve will eventually fall, not because the world is cruel, but because time doesn't wait for those who choose comfort over growth. And we haven't even touched the most chilling part yet, the man-child. He never surrounds himself with people who challenge him. He builds a circle of flatterers, not critics. Why? Because he fears conflict, because every disagreement feels like rejection. He doesn't seek truth. He seeks comfort. And that is a toxin. That's how entire environments get poisoned. One emotionally immature leader, surrounded by cowards too afraid to say what needs to be said. Sound familiar? Don't just think of politicians or public figures. Think of your own life. How many times have you chosen applause over honesty, validation over truth? Because that, right there, is where real growth starts. When you stop depending on anyone else's approval to know who you are. When you can hold your vision, even when no one claps for it. And yet, there's still more. The man-child doesn't know how to be alone. He fears silence, not because he's bored, but because silence makes him confront himself. So he fills his days with noise, with distractions, with people who tell him he's fine, just so he never has to face the mirror. And what does he see when he finally does? That his entire life has been one long escape. Power without self-knowledge is a ticking bomb. Machiavelli would remind you once more, if you don't conquer your own inner world, the world out there will conquer you. True leadership isn't born from charisma or dominance. It's forged in silence, in the moments you face your darkest truths and walk through the tunnels of your mind alone. Scars don't weaken you, they guide you. So what is emotional maturity really? It's not about being serious or cold. It's about knowing how to resist the short-term thrill for long-term gain. It's being able to say no without apology. It's holding steady in your convictions even when the world questions you. It's failing and refusing to use that failure as a reason to give up. But here's where the real strength lies, in taking radical responsibility. No more blaming others. No more, "That's just how I am." Every word, every outburst, every emotional slip leaves a mark. And the world doesn't care about your reasons. It only sees the results. And here comes the dagger truth. Staying immature is a choice. It's not about your upbringing or your trauma. It's about your refusal to grow, because growth hurts. Because maturity means killing your need for immediate comfort. It means owning your life without rescue, without applause. So how do you begin? Start by choosing discomfort. Sit in silence without reaching for distraction. Say no, even when it stings. Build when no one's watching. Hold your ground when everything inside you wants to flee. Think before you speak. Observe before you act. Stand tall even if you're shaking inside. Because maturity, real, raw, undeniable maturity, is built in private, with invisible bricks of restraint, vision, and self-command. Each time you respond instead of react, you strengthen. Each time you rise above drama, you expand. Each time you trade momentary pleasure for long-term growth, you lead. That power, silent, steady, unshakable, isn't glamorous. It doesn't post selfies. It doesn't beg for attention, but it governs kingdoms, starting with your own life. Now, answer honestly. Are you still applauding the child within you, or are you finally ready to bury him so you can rise as the man you were meant to be? If this message hit deep, leave a comment with this phrase, "I lead myself first." Subscribe if you're done making excuses. Share this if you know someone still stuck in their own childish loop. And turn on the bell, because what's coming will challenge everything you've ever been taught about strength. We'll meet again soon. But next time, show up as the version of you that's no longer a slave to his impulses. The world is watching.